Hey guys, welcome and join me in today's lesson while we learn more about invasive species. You might be wondering, what are invasive species? Well, they are exactly what they sound like. Invasive species are harmful. And here's how. Now, let's think about our ecosystem, right? There is a natural balance between all organisms in an ecosystem. But what happens when that ecosystem is disrupted? What happens when this disruption occurs accidentally? Now, invasive species are those species that enter a particular ecosystem. Most often, this is accidental, and they thrive, but at the same time also destroy the natural habitat of other species that were originally native to that ecosystem. So invasive species normally come from a different region. Most commonly they occur or they come from water transportation, so through aquatic means. When a species that does not belong in a particular area finds its way to that particular area, it's known as an invasive species. And in a lot of cases, it can actually also throw off the balance, the natural balance that existed in that area before they were introduced. Now, let's try and answer this question together. If you have any questions, you are also free to watch this 2-minute video for your guidance. But let's try and answer these questions. So what are invasive species? So we know that invasive species are those organisms that originally did not belong to a particular area. These can also disrupt the balance of a given ecosystem. Now, the reason why we say that it can disrupt the balance is because just think about it. There are predators and there are preys in a given ecosystem, right? Those who eat and those who get eaten, predator and prey. But what happens when a whole new species enters that ecosystem? There will be a lot of competition for food, right? And that's why it can disrupt the existing balance. Now, where have most of the invasive species come from? Normally, most of these come from Europe and Asia. And the reason why we say Europe and Asia is because there is a lot of import of goods that takes place from these regions, especially using ships, so cargo ships. These accidentally pick up species from Europe or from Asia and bring them to America, or they take them from America to Europe. So there is this accidental transportation that occurs. These might accidentally get stuck to some parts of ship, and they might come back and start growing in a whole new area, in a whole new ecosystem. So water transportation is the most common source of the spread of invasive species. So it mainly come from Europe and Asia through aquatic transportation. Now let's look at the next question. Without predators or natural competitors, what do invasive species do in a new location? Okay, if there are no predators, right? No one to eat the invasive species, what do you think will happen? If they're not being eaten, they'll thrive. They'll reproduce, right? They'll just take over. They will dominate the entire ecosystem as long as they can keep growing in that particular environment. And if there are no natural competitors for their food, they'll just keep eating, they'll just keep growing, keep reproducing, right? So they'll just keep thriving and completely take over of that particular ecosystem. So if there are no predators or natural competitors, they will thrive with more than enough food for survival and reproduction. Now, what can you do to stop the growth of invasive species? It's very important that we stop the growth of invasive species because these can disrupt, as I've already said, these can disrupt the environment. But these can also lead to a lack of food sources for native species. For example, in many cases, what happens is people like exotic plants or exotic animals, and they intentionally sometimes bring exotic plants to America. And these end up hindering the growth of plants that were already growing in that particular area. They'll take up more nutrients, they'll take up more water from the native plants, leading them to die and the invasive species to grow, right? So what can you do? Maybe don't use them. Maybe don't buy them. Maybe don't import the invasive species just because you think they're cool. Reinforce the growth of native species of plants and animals, and maybe even volunteer to make sure these can be cut off. If you're talking about plants, there are a lot of groups out there that ask for people to volunteer so that these invasive species can be cut down. So that's what you can do. Stop the growth of invasive species by reinforcing the growth of native species of plants and animals. This can be done by either stopping the import completely or picking it up from the roots. I hope this helps. If you have any questions, please feel free to talk to me, and I will see you guys later. Thank you. Bye.